Sounds pretty huge.
Nice. Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello.
So, what we thought we'd do today is discuss the idea of a pedal platform amplifier, something that we've heard the concept talked about a lot. And to do that, we're very lucky to have the new Wampler Bravado amplifier.
Which is, if you watched any of the NAMM coverage, Dan and I were there doing that pedal show on Anderson's TV. And one of the videos we made was with Brian Wampler. Wampler. And we spent a little while getting the pronunciation right. And Brian was explaining to us that he's designed this amp specifically as a pedal platform amp because lots of the amps out there, to their great credit, have a sound. Mm-hmm. So, of course, a Marshall Plexi sounds a certain way, a Fender Super Reverb sounds a certain way, blah, 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 ad nauseum. And that can either be a really good thing or not such a good thing depending on how you approach pedals.
Yeah, exactly, because some pedals are going to sound great into them and some don't. For example, and you've seen it all the time when we talk about the mid-hump and the tube screamer working with this, the silver face or the Fender scoop type thing. Vice versa, the treble boosters into the crank voxes and those sorts of things. So the way these pedals, they have their gain structures and their EQ shape, and the way that that complements, or perhaps less complements.
Yeah.
Is that a word?
Well,
less complementary towards other amplifiers.
We were having a conversation with Jason Welding from Wampler, Wampler, in the UK, who he says, and I think we concur, that there are basically three types of guitar players out there. There's one guy, when it comes to effects pedals. No, there's one guy who goes, nope. Don't need no pedals. No pedals. All I need is an amp and a guitar, and that's it. What do you need any pedals for, you weirdos? That's him. That's number one. Number two is kind of our end of things, which is you've got a classic amp and you want to augment it. Mm. So, for example, Jimi Hendrix and his Fuzz face, Stevie Ray Vaughan and his Tube Screamer, David Gilmour and his Power Driver, etc., etc., etc. Those tones wouldn't exist with a guitar and an amp because you needed the pedal to work with it.
Yeah.
And similarly, if you plug Stevie Ray's Tube Screamer into Jimmy's Plexi, it sounded blooming awful.
Yeah. Certainly wasn't that sound, was it?
Yeah, it was a different sound. So the second guy, the guy who's moved on from, nope, don't need no pedals ever. No way, not me. Moving on from him, we've got these great combinations of classic sounds. And then moving on from that is seeing the pedal board as kind of the home of everything and wanting the cleanest and most transparent and least colouring sound thereafter.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind the pedal platform. So, and it's an interesting concept because if you think about it, most people think of a pedal platform amplifier as an amplifier that has a lot of headroom.
Yep.
But there are lots of amplifiers that have lots of headroom that I wouldn't necessarily think are a pedal platform. They might sound good with certain sort of pedals, like the Fender Twin has got a lot of high headroom, and in a sense it works with lots of pedals, but it definitely has a very pronounced shape.
Yeah, don't plug a fuzz face into it, as we've done a couple of times before. Yeah, so
much
worse a tone bender.
It's we had so the old silver face that we had here, the 100 watt was it's like a PA in an amp in a box.
I'm sure I've told this story before. I remember, so when I was about 15, I had what did I have? I had a Yamaha did a solid state amp at the time, which had a little switch on it.
It wasn't the stereo one.
No,
I had the stereo one.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
No,
With GP8 into the stereo, it was wicked.
But it was the 50 watt, and I was about 14, 15, just really getting into it, just really starting to understand it. Started listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan going, and then, because the internet didn't exist then for anyone under the age of 30, the internet didn't exist then, so there wasn't any information. The only information you could get was from guitar magazines, which were extremely expensive. So, everything was hearsay down the music shop. And as far as I was concerned, Stevie Ray Vaughan used the Fender Twin and nothing else. which is the information that I had at the time. Had I just looked at the back cover of Live Alive, of course, that would have been different. Anyway, so I'm thinking, right, the thing to get is a Fender Twin. So I save up all my cash, buy a Fender Twin, a knackered 70s 120 watt Fender Twin.
Yeah, baby.
Turned it on, it's like, ooh. Turned it up to 10 at the band practice. This doesn't sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan at all. Because, you know, it just wasn't that sound. But to make that point, that loud, it did not work.
Still to this day, though, one of the best guitar sounds I've ever heard was from an old 70s Twin.
Yeah.
Just this guy, he had this old Strat, the fret messing out of it. One of the speakers was blown in the Twin. You could see that it was all, the thing was the...
Eye patch, one leg.
Yeah,
all of it.
And he had a DM2 Boss Delay, a really old tube screamer, and a compressor. And this little club gig at Twin Towns at Coolangatta. And I just wandered in there, and it was life-changing. It sounded incredible. So they can sound
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying
amazing.
they don't sound good. I was saying-
But what I'm
yeah.
saying is, but he had found that magic combination that worked with that amplifier. And that's what a lot of stuff that we talk about, you know. But the pedal platform idea is that, you know, it allows the real nature of the pedals to come through. The question is, how do you do that without it sounding sterile? So, you know, because the idea of just lots and lots of headroom doesn't necessarily translate to great tone.
Yeah, so the question that links directly to that, which we get asked quite a lot, is, you've got all those silly solid state boxes on the pedal board, and then you plug them into a nice valve amp. Aren't you totally negating the need or negating the function of a good valve amp because you're losing all of it with your silly solid state boxes?
Yep.
And of course not at all, because it's about the interaction. Similarly, instead of using a really nicely well-designed valve amp, why don't you just use a full range flat response PA cabinet? And the answer to that is because it sounds like toilet. Just get that out there. So clearly what we're dealing with here is something in between those two things. So should we get on with it? So we've got the Wampler Bravado, which is 40 watt 6L6 with a valve rectifier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, just for comparison, we've got Mesa Lone Star, and we've chosen the Mesa Lone Star very deliberately because it's got a clean channel and a dirty channel, and we can kind of get into that a little bit in terms of gain range and all the rest of it. Should we just hear the...
Yeah, so
the
this is the Bravado. Now that is, I mean, it's loud in here.
You play.
It's such a lovely, clean sound. It's dynamic and responsive, but it's still warm. Yeah, you have a go. It's amazing. I'm going to grab the telly as well. The reason I wanted to do that with the Les Paul is it can be quite hard to get a decent clean sound out of Les Paul, but I like that.
Well, that wasn't pushing that at all, was it? It wasn't breaking up. So the first observation is it has an extreme amount of headroom in the front end. So. Clean. But not hard. It's not. It's
lovely mids.
Absolutely nothing like. So JC120, absolutely nothing like that whatsoever. Even though it has a comparable amount of clean headroom thus far.
Yeah, but there's that lovely. When you
more adjectives, Dan.
When you attack, look,
soupy, soft, silky.
Anyway, that's the
It has
Wampler.
guitar face mid range.
In comparison to the Lone Star. Now, I would say that's more a typical Fender, almost blackfacey type.
Yeah. Well, so if you don't know the Lone Star, the first channel is kind of blackfacey.
It is.
Yeah, but it can go. It can do more than that. We set it up to sound fairly anodyne. I'll give you an example. So here's what the mid range control on the Lone Star does. So that's the clean channel. So there's quite a bit of gain available in that clean channel as well, which we'll get into why that is significant in a minute. But that's kind of why we've chosen the Lone Star, because it is a very versatile amp. Equally, we could have got up a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe or something like that, which is the sort of core middle of the road pedal amp. We don't actually have a Hot Rod Deluxe. We're changing that, but.
We have one on the way.
We have one on the way. So the Lone Star is doing that job. So back to the Bravado, I believe it sort of started in one of the most revered, best all-rounder, superbly influential guitar amps of all time is the Fender Deluxe. So whether that's in tweed form or when it changed into the blackface, 6v6s, 22 watts, perfect position of power and volume, and loads of people used them for years and years. Apparently Lukather used one for years and years.
Really?
Somebody told me the solo on Rosanna was a Deluxe and a Les Paul, which I'm not sure I quite believe, but anyway, he did use one for years and he absolutely loved it. Perfect recording amp. However, it does have some downsides. One is when you crank it, you get an overdrive that you either like or you don't.
Yep.
Two, there's not much bottom end,
which is why they sound so great recorded.
So if we imagine a few evolutionary steps on from that, what we've got is a huge amount of headroom and a load of volume as well, actually. It's super
massive.
loud. And what we were just about to get into when we were just when I was going through the front panel there, is it has, certainly in terms of brightness and treble and presence, it's got way more available than your average guitar amp.
Right.
Check this out. So this is going to sound bad, all right? And the question is, why would you ever need that much presence and brightness in a guitar amp? Well, we'll come on to that, because it depends what pedals you're plugging in, hence why it's a pedal platform amp.
Right, so let's look at this. This is the Plexi Drive. This is the original 3-knob version. So we have a pedal platform amplifier, and we have what they call the amp-in-a-box style pedals. Right, so you've got the idea behind these amp-in-a-box style pedals is plugged into an amplifier that can take it. They give you characteristic. I'm not going to say they sound exactly like the amplifier, but they give you more of that characteristic. Right, so this is the Plexi Drive into the Wampler. So you really hear that Fender top end sizzle and
all the mid-range is gone.
yeah. Isn't that funny? Very interesting.
What I really like about the Wampler is on the bright control you've got instant high-end attenuation or improvement. So what the relationship of the high-end changes radically depending on volume. So you're sat at home and it all sounds good and big and fat and brilliant. You get to the band rehearsal and it doesn't quite cut. A little more high-end. Get to the gig, everything's really loud. Drummer's using the thick end of his sticks on his however big a big ride cymbal is. The one that is always about 2 inches from my ear.
It's that China.
Yeah.
China.
Because they're not loud enough already. And he's hammering away on that like there's no tomorrow. And all of a sudden your guitar isn't cutting. If you boost the treble at that point and the presence, great, that can work. But it can also start overdriving more in those frequencies. So the amp compresses more. What's interesting about that is you've got instant control. So it can sound really friendly and nice and warm and, hug me to punch me in the face. And
because that presence control, it's not like on a normal pod. It's on like a selector. It's going through different capacitance and capacitor values and resistance values and stuff. So Brian's done a really amazing job of fine tuning.
And presumably an input impedance thing as well. I would have thought there's some relationship there somewhere.
There will be that relationship.
Yeah, we're assuming that.
They're friends.
We could probably
but
check
they're moving
that.
into certain.
No, I know on my 2 Rock it's got an input impedance thing on the back.
Right.
Which does a similar job but not as pronounced as that. So.
Okay, very good. So that's the amp in a box live. You have a go. I want to hear you do it. So this is the Wampler.
I'm gonna put a bit more front end in the Lone Star.
Okay.
Because at the minute we're almost comparing apples with apples.
Or chalk to cheese.
Yes. No. We're comparing chalk and chalk at the moment in a way because we've got this huge high headroom clean sound set up in the Lone Star.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I hear.
So I'm just going to push the front end of the Lone Star a bit more.
Yep. Right. So this is just the Lone Star then.
Just give me. So now the Lone Star is overdriving much more. Let's hear the Plexi Drive.
So the volume increase with the Wampler, because it's not caving in, it just goes wah. Whereas into the Lone Star, because it's compressing more, you don't get that big boost in
Can I just try it with this guitar?
Of course you can. So Wampler.
So it's
that sounds ace.
It's kind of job done in a way. The change I made to the Lone Star was quite deliberate in pushing the front end a bit more because depending on what kind of amp you have, clearly some amps have huge amounts of clean headroom, but a lot don't. Certainly when you start pushing a Hot Rod Deluxe, it'll break up. And in the specific case of the amp in a box type pedal, it retained, to me anyway, it retained more of the character of what it's supposed to be into that, because there was much more note definition. The mid-range was completely different, which is not just an EQ thing, it's also about how much it's overdriving. And when you push the front of the Lone Star, everything starts to get a bit confused, which, you know, is a sound. Some people really love that, you know, an overdrive pedal into a driving amp is a sound, but it's doing a very different job.
Definitely. And
the bass started to become a bit flubby. Yeah,
it's caving in, you know, because it's that whole gain structure thing. It's you're pushing the front end of an already overdriven amplifier, whereas the Wampler just sort of took it and was great. Very interesting. The mid range in the Wamplers for me is very interesting. It's a very thick, punchy mid range, and the frequencies are just right.
Yeah,
you know. Whereas, like, so for example,
just see how powerful it is a sec. So if you turn the Plexi Drive on, and then see what the pot does. And the mid-range.
That's some lovely goodness right there. Very nice.
This guitar
I'm really impressed.
Guitar is bonkers. I was surprised that it was pushing the Lone Star into overdrive at fairly low gain levels, but it was also pushing that one slightly into overdrive as well.
What does this one do? Not like that.
Mad, isn't it?
But the humbuckers in that are compressing differently as well. All right, cool. So that's the amp in a box type thing. Now, how does it work with more traditional overdrive pedal? So this is what I'm very interested in. In the Lone Star, because the Lone Star's overdriving a bit more. Now, I know if I put a fuzz into that, the fuzz is going to react in a way that works with that amp overdrive. Okay, so my good mate Scotty Smith from ProAnalog. So this is one of his Mark IVs. So this is into the Lone Star.
Not happening today. Normally this is a very resonant guitar.
Okay, but that could be a phase relationship as well. Anyway, this is the Wampler with the fuzz.
I actually love that.
I love that. I tell you what it is. It's that mid-range.
Yeah.
Because normally, when you have your clean sound set up, normally those sort of clean voiced amplifiers are naturally scoopy. But the mid-range of that, when you hear the fuzz, and it just punches that mid-range. It sounds ace!
If you didn't like the top end, because the top end's a bit fizzy, which is a good thing in my opinion, but,
yes.
But if you didn't like that... It's a whole different set of sounds.
That is so cool.
See what it does with the Strat-Sec. So Mark IV means Mark IV tone bender, does it?
Yes. He has two versions, the green version and the blue version. The green version has purely silicon, and the blue version has the silicon and the germanium transistors in it.
It's almost a bit of upper octave
Well,
weirdness going on.
Okay, but here's the thing. That is in the pedal.
Yeah.
Right? So you have the overtones, the harmonic overtones happening with the transistors. But because that amp has so much headroom, you're hearing it. This is what I want to try. If I turn the if I go back to the Plexi, and then I turn this on, just play for us. So using this to mimic the front end of that amplifier.
Yeah.
Now if I hit that with the fuzz.
You know what, I'm going to keep coming back to it, but that bright switch, I love it because it now sounds a bit more like a Plexi. So if you've ever plugged a Plexi in, it sounds like it's going to rip your face off.
Right.
With the amount of aggressive high end.
Right.
I'll just turn it up again, but... It's got that aggression.
If I take the Plexi Drive out.
Yeah, a bit harder.
Yeah.
But cool.
Awesome. Loving that. Okay, let's try the King of Tone, because it's a pedal that we're very familiar with. Okay, so let's go.
Don't like it at all.
King of Tone into the Wampler. So straight away you hear that slight mid-hump of the King of Tone working with the mid-range, that sort of more level, you know, no scoop sound. But we hear that into the...
Yeah, so because the Lone Star's set with much more gain, everything is overdriving, you get less note definition. Just going to take a little bit of the gain out of the Lone Star there, a tiny bit. It's a different sound.
Different sound.
Yeah.
But great, I mean, punchy as all get out. It's lovely.
And comes back to what we were saying right at the head of the video, where combination of pedal and amp is one sound, and then using pedal board amp to get louder. You're hearing more of the pedal, aren't you?
You're hearing more of the pedal, absolutely. It's It's great.
Yeah, to play with yours?
Yeah, baby.
Move right along to the OCD. Which one's OCD in?
I believe the OCD is in... yeah. It's really funny because in a way, that's an easier sound to play with because
there's more gain.
There's more gain. It's squashier, but you don't. But because there's less mids, it goes back to that thing I was saying about the whole Dumble thing. Because that mid range is so punchy that you need to be, you get away with a lot more.
Yeah.
With that sort of sound, but into the Wampler. And those mids they're so prevalent, and I mean it's great. Imagine that in a mix.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome, but you're going to hear everything. You know, it's lovely. See there? It sounds like a fluff, but if I did that into the... I mean, it still sounds like a fluff, but because of where the frequencies of the guitar are centered is exactly what that's pumping out. So yeah, really, really interesting.
I think the reason I moved on to the OCD quite quickly there is because it really highlights the point that those pedals are designed very much to be used in combination with an amp that you really like, getting it done, getting that amp to a point. You know, it's a game of 50-50, isn't it? Whereas the amp in a box style pedals definitely respond better to an amp that has less inherent individual colour about it, which kind of almost sounds like it might be damning the Bravado with faint praise because it's saying that it doesn't have any character. It absolutely does. It has a different character.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's not to say that every pedal that you get is going to sound amazing in the Bravado because it still has its own thing, you know. But what you are going to hear is the pedal.
I'm pretty sure that once you start combining multiple overdrive pedals, let's say you're using a, I'm not going to talk about it. Let's just do it, Dan. Can you put the Plexi Drive after the OCD.
Yep.
Can you do that?
Yep, I can. So.
Okay, so Dan's using the terribly clever technology in the TheGigRig G2 has swapped the loops around so that the Plexi Drive is now coming after the OCD. Yeah.
After the OCD.
So let's start with the Wampler amplifier, and let's set ourselves up a good core. We're going to assume that this is doing an amp job.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Sounds pretty martially to me. And then we want to give that some love in the front end, misses, with the OCD.
You're going to put it in the front, OCD in the front?
Yeah. Loads of definition in those notes. Everything, you can hear everything, sounds lovely and huge. What does it sound like into the Lone Star? So start off with the Plexi Drive. Really interesting. So it's holding on to everything where the Mesa starts to overdrive more. I mean, it's nice because it becomes all chewy and all those things you really like. But the amp is really adding...
It's doing its own, adding its own character. Yeah.
Whereas I think the Bravado is staying a bit cleaner, a bit more string definition. And that mid-range definitely a sound, isn't it? It's definitely got its own mid character.
Yeah, it's this lower mid thing going on. It's just
bearing in mind
really
we're using it through a 212 that's got some WGS warehouse guitar speakers, quite transparent high power speakers in it. So what cab you use with is going to make a massive difference.
Massive difference.
But
the exciting thing for me with these sort of amplifiers is the way they handle the other end of the spectrum, the effects, the delays and reverbs and modulations and things. So, okay, for example, this is the Bravado by itself. Now, if I put the MXR reverb on, you hear everything.
it's clean.
Everything. And I do the same thing in the Lone Star. The space is more defined in the amp with more headroom. It's very interesting the way that the reverb works.
Well, you're probably yelling at the camera now, but if you just set the Lone Star cleaner with much more headroom, won't it sound exactly the same? Yeah, it'll sound kind of similar. That's the point. Not all amps have that much headroom in the front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you add a little bit of delay, loveliness to that.
Little bit of clumsy switching there, thanks to me, but the point I was trying to make was that the delay gets lost as soon as it hits the more distorted end of the amp. Now, of course, the next question is, why don't you just run it all in the loop? Yes, you can do that if you want. The Bravado has a loop, the Lone Star has a loop. Mm-hmm. For lots and lots of reasons, which we get into in other videos, Dan and I don't tend to use loops because it just adds a whole bunch of complication, because every loop sounds different, blah, 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 blah. So we're just dealing with the front end of the amp in this video. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you've got your delay into a cleaner amp, it sounds cleaner.
Yeah.
Even though you've got plenty of gain going on there.
Yeah.
In the Plexi Drive, which we had.
Yeah. But, okay, so things like this, right? This is the new Tremotron from Stone Deaf Effects. It's this digitally controlled analog tremolo that does these amazing things. But would you put it into an amplifier that can handle the amazing things it does? You've got two tremolos going at the same time there. Awesome!
Yeah. Hang on, what have we got? 9, 10 and 12, yeah?
Yep, 1. 9,
yeah.
10, 9, 10, 12, yeah?
Yeah, keep going.
Yep.
So, I think that illustrates the point quite nicely.
This is what I love about that, because you hear how hard that is. Those edges are slamming into the front end. You get all that. It's awesome.
Yeah. Now you might be watching, going, "Well, I much prefer the sound of the Mesa because it wasn't so hard and staccato." That's completely a subjective choice.
Yeah.
What you prefer is, that's the right thing for you. The point is, with the high headroom amp that can take it, what you hear is the pedals more, right?
Exactly, and that's the whole point of the whole thing. You're hearing what the designer has put into these boxes. But it's, you know, I'm really impressed. I mean, I was impressed with it at the show, but because of the environment of the show...
Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear.
It's really hard to hear. But it was like, there's something about it. I thought, oh, that sounds really nice. And I'm super impressed. I think it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, you've got... I think if you come to this and you're looking for a new amp, so most people, which of course is a dangerous... We're into general observations. But, okay, so lots of people, when they're looking for a decent pedal amp, will go to something like a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. And it just so happens that the Fender Hot Rod Deluxe is the best-selling valve amp out there, so it outsells everything else in that market by some considerable margin. And therefore, there are loads of them out there, and they're on pro stages everywhere because they're pretty good at doing everything. When you move on from that, you've got a bunch of decisions to make. Do you go to something like a 2-Rock, which is tremendously expensive but also has a really good clean channel? Do you go to something like a Victory V40, which is a similar price but sounds kind of different? Blah blah blah. I think Wampler entering this marketplace is really interesting.
It's fascinating.
Because when you break it down, there actually isn't that much choice. Because then what do you go to? A 2-channel amp? EVH? Something with loads of gain in it? All of a sudden, not such a good pedal amp, which of course is a ridiculous thing to say because all amps are good pedal amps if it gives you the sound you want.
Yep.
But yeah, really interesting.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. I know that Earthquaker Devices have got a new amplifier out there this year as well. So there's a couple of other companies doing some of their own amplifiers as well. But hearing this in the flesh, this is like actually totally get it. I could take that and gig happily, you know, take any pedal board, plug into that and gig very, very happily. Yeah. It sounds fantastic.
It does sound good. Sounds very good. Okay, all right. So what makes a good pedal amp? One that sounds clear and loud and helps the pedals sound like they should.
If it doesn't sound sterile, still has a character.
Yeah. Or 50-watt Plexi turned up to 10.
Very good.
It's completely your choice. But I think that is a really interesting addition to the market. And I hope we get to spend more time with it.
Yeah,
compare it to some other things.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed that. And before we go, quick thank you to
everyone who's bought a t-shirt.
Everyone who's bought a t-shirt.
Thank you very much. Pedalshowstore.com. You'll notice we have some new designs. All our patrons at patreon.com. Thank you so much for that. It helps us keep doing what we're doing. Crowdfunding for creatives. And of course, our exclusive preferred retailers in the UK and Europe, that is Andertons. And in the US, that's Riff City Music. Hello to all you guys there.
Brilliant. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. Really hope you enjoyed that. And we'll see you next Friday. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.